Hey, this is Ben Kraus for another set of office hours here on this sunny February 16th, winter time in Minnesota. I am your host and fearless leader, founder, and all those things, Benjamin Kraus, uh, attorney and journalist that covers the Department of Veterans Affairs and other related issues and scandals and agencies and everything else. And in addition to that, I help veterans in this group to access voc rehab without getting screwed by the federal government out of their benefits. Wanted to talk a little bit today about obviously voc rehab, and we're going to talk about the top 3 mistakes that veterans make going into their first meeting. This is probably the most important meeting that a veteran can have with voc rehab, and very often, due to the mistakes I'm about to talk about, it is also the first and last meeting that a lot of veterans have with their agency when seeking retraining and benefits under that program. So I want to talk for a bit about how you can not get bounced out of the program when you try to seek this benefits in this manner. And we are going to do that over the next half hour. We're also going to talk about any questions that people have here in the group. So if you do have a question while I'm talking, you can feel free to enter that question into the comment section, and I will do my best to answer it while we're chatting. Otherwise, I want to give newbies a little bit of oversight into this group and what we do here, what it's all about. First and foremost, this is a group for veterans. It is not a group for VA. So that means this group is particularly veteran friendly. We actively discourage attacks and negative crap against fellow members and other veterans. We discourage what I call eat your own behavior on social media, meaning members who decide to call other members liars and get into, investigating other members' backgrounds and all that crap. That's really not what we do here. I discourage it because I think it more often than not. Hey there, Chanel or Shelly, good to see you. More often than not, it discourages members from speaking up and from being actively engaged. And we want to make sure that this particular group is as inviting to veterans as possible, because most people that have disabilities have already endured a fair amount of trauma. We don't need to further force them to endure more trauma while they try to access their benefits. That's basically my position here. And in light of many veterans that have mental health disorders and other issues related to their service, we really don't want to pile on to that trauma. We already know it's hard enough to get your disability benefits from the VA, or at least I should say a fair rating from the VA. So, we figure we'll give you the benefit of the doubt here. Aside from that, this is a group, again, run by me. I'm a lawyer, also a journalist. I'm a disabled veteran who fought with the agency for about 15 years to get my fair shake from benefits. I used voc rehab for about 12 years, where the agency paid for me to attend Northwestern University outside of Chicago, and then afterwards, University of Minnesota up in Minneapolis for my law degree. And then they also supported my law firm, my law practice. And so all in, I received over $350,000 in benefits directly from voc rehab. Now, that wasn't like a check to me, of course. The value of the benefits was worth $350 or more. Some of the money came to me by way, of course, subsistence payment or repayment of things I paid out of pocket, but the rest really went to the universities that covered tuition. So I studied economics and creative nonfiction writing at Northwestern, and of course, as you know, law at the University of Minnesota Law School. During that period of time, due to a lot of the interactions I had with the VA, I realized that veterans getting benefits from the voc rehab program lacked a voice. And so in 2009, after realizing a lot of the problems with this particular program and lack of transparency, created this particular Facebook group. So that was a while ago. My God, that was like 9 years ago. So we're almost coming up on 10 years here, and the group is over 25,000 veterans strong. So we're real excited about that. If you're here, you're obviously trying to key in on some of the resources that we have and get some of the feedback from us. Hang on, I gotta raise my desk up a little bit.
With Home Chef Fast and Fresh, all you need is a microwave or oven, and just enough time to heat, eat, and repeat.
That's better. Okay. So anyway, so here we are in the group. Like I said, I'm a journalist, and so in 2009, 2010, somewhere in there, I used disability compensation monies to purchase the URL disabledveterans.org and started writing on it, and also, was moderating this particular group. And that's really the only type of like resource or website online right now that is of the type that it is, which is a website run by an attorney that has been around for a very long time and exposes scandals and news and benefits secrets to veterans on a regular basis. And that's what we do there. A lot of, I'm going to give myself the shameless plug. The website itself and what I do as a journalist is self-funded and funded by your purchases. So if you happen to need a guide related to voc rehab, and we're going to be rolling out a few other educational courses related to benefits, definitely, purchase it. We really support and work for veterans and trying to expose problems in the system related to voc rehab and other benefits, and your purchase supports us and we support you. So definitely appreciate whatever you can do. Some of the projects coming up are going to be a rating system that will allow veterans to publicly rate Veterans Affairs employees, especially related to voc rehab. Now, that's not cheap. I'm going to have to pay a developer a fair amount of money to build out that directory, and then once the directory is out, you'll be able to rate VA employees and the quality of their service. This is acutely important for healthcare services and also voc rehab services where you do interface with the VA employee on a regular basis. So that's one of the newer projects coming up. I'm also working on the online Veterans Resource Center that I've been plugging away at for a few years. That's about to go live. I hoped it would go live last month, but I ended up getting really sick, so that didn't happen. So here we are, looking forward to finishing that project here. We're going to have some new courses, and the courses are basically, I guess how I view that is me as an attorney and an educator giving what we would call in the legal community continuing legal education, but basically I'll be selling access to the courses that I create to educate veterans about their benefits, which is very similar to what we do in the legal community for attorneys, except I won't charge $300 a course or whatever it is that we end up having to pay when we try to do that. So it'll be a lot less for veterans. Of course, attorneys that want to, sit in will have to pay the full price. But there's probably not a lot of attorneys that really care about this stuff anyway. But nonetheless, that is what's coming up and what we're going to be doing. Very excited about that. Now, in the news, a lot of you have probably seen what is going on this week, which is a whole coup within the Department of Veterans Affairs, where the Secretary Shulkin is in the middle of an ouster. And so there is a coup of some individuals that are political appointees underneath him that are trying to push him out, and two of his underlings. They are leveraging, now while that on the surface seems bad, they're leveraging some of the bad decisions that Shulkin made when he accepted Wimbledon tickets and a dinner or something like that from a person who works for a government contractor. Now that's bad and unethical and probably illegal if not disclosed. So he ended up getting caught, and it's results in this huge row publicly. In addition to that, his chief of staff, Vivica White, I believe her name was, just stepped down today because she is part of the mistake that resulted in this huge quagmire, where the IG did investigate and did conclude that Shulkin had misled certain individuals and officials related to his trip to Denmark and England, where they brought all their spouses, these VA employees, on this 10-day trip, and only about 3 to 3.5 days were spent doing official business, and the remainder was just sightseeing, quite literally seeing like the Little Mermaid statue, and I think it's Copenhagen, going to Wimbledon to watch Wimbledon with a government contractor that works for Sage Software, where they gave free tickets to them and also took Shulkin and his wife and his son out for dinner. Like really weird behavior that if any other VA employee did that, they would be probably investigated and prosecuted, or at least definitely fired. But that's not what we're seeing here. So we're definitely seeing kind of the rollout of the double standard that has been in VA. And we've been talking about this for a while here on the website, where VA employees, just the average Joe, are really getting hit hard with respect to terminations and the new accountability laws. And those are really passed to go after leadership in the VA, to fire bad leaders. I mean, that's at least what the public was sold on. And what we're instead seeing is basically the little guys that are going out for, they're requesting reasonable accommodations or something, and then magically coming up and getting fired a couple months later. We're seeing that all across the nation. We're seeing, again, a lot of prosecution of the little guy, but the big fish that are in the VA are not being hit hard, or if they are, it's some kind of goofy, spousal scheme. It's very strange. So like what you see with Shulkin as an example, what they hit him on was a dinner with his wife and a government contractor and going to Wimbledon with his wife, right? It wasn't any of the other stuff that might have been going on. Likewise, there was one scandal that comes to mind out in Philadelphia where I think it was the pension manager at the time, had disposed of a room full of documentation supporting veterans claims, right? So many boxes, thousands of boxes, and they magically just disappeared. No one knows where they went. It was reported to the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, et cetera. And that guy ended up getting pinched, not for, fraud and destruction of government property and government records, but instead he had a seance with his supervisor where his own wife conducted the seance. And they charged low-level employees for the benefit of having their fortune told or some ridiculous thing. So that's what he ended up getting pinched for. So what you see across the VA, just very weird, are basically bad actors that engage in like horrific criminal behavior, but they're busted for just like really unusual nuances. So like another example would be Sharon Hellman, who supervised Phoenix VA going into the wait list, and rather than being prosecuted for the veterans that died while they were engaging in active fraud to boost their numbers and get higher bonuses, instead what she got pinched for is accepting a lobbyist gift to take her family to Disneyland without disclosing it. I mean, it's kind of like, that's bad, but not as bad as dead veterans. But, God forbid we see any kind of real justice in the VA. That seems to be just how it is. So that's a little update here on what's going on in veteran land. And so what you're probably going to see is Jake Leinenkugel will probably be moved into the deputy secretary slot, and they'll move Thomas Bowman out. Then you'll see someone else named to be the chief of staff, and likely at some point in the near future, we will see Shulkin resign. And I think, as I understand it, he's been doing a good job. As largely Rob McDonald. Like, it was really a disappointment to see Bob McDonald go, because he was really pushing veteran first and customer service, which is something that the VA was sorely lacking and is still sorely lacking. So now to see Shulkin, being moved toward the door, it's a little concerning, because anytime they have transition like that with a new leadership team, you end up with like a year worth of waste and lost knowledge of basically who the criminals are that are working within the VA. And there are criminals, they just haven't been prosecuted, working in the agency. So it retards that particular process of knowing basically who the enemies of the veterans are. So not looking forward to anyone who is new being appointed into that role, because it's important to keep continuity, I think, while they do the expansion of choice and some of the other things that they're working on. But nonetheless, that's where we're at, and they're probably going to move somebody else out. It's election time, so we're getting ready for big changes at the VA, where Trump will be able to brag about something. So I'm sure that's what we're gonna see. Anyway, so that's enough about news and press and politics and all that stuff. We just hope that the VA gets cleaned up at some point, but don't hold your breath. It's been broken for about 80 years. So I don't anticipate any changes to come any day soon, because it is what it is. I think it's personally, I think it's broken on purpose, and we really shouldn't expect a whole lot from an agency formerly known as the Bureau of War Risk Insurance. It is an insurance company after all, and we need to remember that whenever we're trying to get benefits from that agency. It's all about the numbers, and they really could give two rips about you. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about voc rehab and the top 3 mistakes veterans make on their first appointment. Now, the first appointment after you put in for the benefit is very, very important. Oftentimes what you will receive are going to be a rehabilitative needs inventory sheet, and also be asked to take the career scope exam, which is basically an aptitude test. It's kind of like ASVAB. And then they just see what your interests are. Now, personally, I'm not sure why they do that instead of consulting with the ASVAB, which is much more detailed and supposedly even more accurate, but whatever. Nonetheless, that is what we deal with. And so you go in, you bring in whatever supporting documentation you can, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to talk about the 3 big fails, the things that veterans do that I find over and over again that results in a wrongful denial. Not so much even because the agency makes a mistake, but because the veteran doesn't come to the table with the right information the first time to help avoid the mistake to begin with. And so the first fail is, number 1, failure to prepare prior to the meeting. That's super important. We'll get into that and why that's important in a bit. And number 2, fail to fill out forms properly. I just talked about those forms. That's super important. And then 3 is failure to present written support. So that means basically the evidence that, outside of what they've already asked for, that you could probably use to get these benefits. So at any rate, those are the 3. So I'm going to start with number 3 first, failure to present written support. So just like when you go in for your disability compensation, if you know what you're doing, you go in with a written explanation of why you think benefits are supported by the evidence, and be prepared to defend it. Try not to make it very long, etc. That is probably super important. So that document is going to connect your service connection with your present employment handicap, which is a requirement to be entitled for voc rehab benefits. So you must have an employment handicap, and it's got to be related to your disability that is service connected. So it can't be some other kind of thing that's not service connected, right? And it doesn't need to be entirely the result of service connection. So like, let's say,
Training at home is great. Training yourself isn't. That's embarrassing. But with Proform,
you have a few other issues that make it hard for you to find work or keep work or to maintain a job that's suitable for you. Lots of veterans have jobs that are not suitable, and so in this kind of vein, you're going to be basically working to, how would you explain it? So basically, you're going to be working to try to connect the dots between your service-connected disability and where you're at right now, how it affects your ability to work, and other kinds of things. So that's very important, and it'll make more sense here once I get to number 1, of course, which is how to prepare prior to the meeting. The second thing that veterans tend to also do is fail to fill out the forms properly. So we'll get an RNI, rehabilitative needs inventory, and you'll also get the career scope. It's important to do those before you show up to the meeting. Doing this will help show the voc rehab counselor that you at least are serious and that you know what you're doing. It's always important to remember that your first meeting is basically an interview. It's a forensic exam, and I'll get more into this in a second, but it's important to know that they're creating a legal record. They're not there to be your buddy or your counselor to help you through when your mommy got mad at you one day. That is not what they're there for. They're there to conduct a forensic exam, and that information is going to be used for legal purposes. So you got to really keep that in mind. It's very important. So when you're going through these forms, the RNI, you have to be real thorough and explain the elements that I previously talked about regarding presenting written support and connecting the dots between your service-connected disabilities and your inability to gain and maintain suitable employment. The RNI form will really help you connect those dots, but it may not cover everything. So that's why you need to present additional written support beyond that. But the R&I, fill it out, take your time, think it through, get feedback from your VSO or an attorney or somebody else, to make sure that what you're writing down makes sense. And also definitely make sure you do the career scope exam, because it's just a requirement. You got to do it. It's not very long. And then with those 2 documents plus, whatever else you need, then you go to the meeting. Now, the number 1 thing that people fail to do, this is the number 1 fail, is to prepare for the meeting before the meeting. So that's a big chunk of like my guide, right? The Voc Rehab Survival Guide. That's why I wrote it. A lot of veterans before I wrote it had asked me, how I was able to get approved for a private university. This was when I was at Northwestern, and then after. And so they would ask about it, and I could sit there and I could write, a 100-page email every single time somebody asked some kind of nuanced question about it, or write a guide, right? So I opted for the latter, and luckily that helps us, fund the operation and my investigations into the VA. But preparing for the meeting, whether you buy the guide or not, and you just wing it, either way, you got to prepare before the meeting. That means you got to understand what the regs are. You got to understand what your disabilities are. You got to understand how your disabilities affect your ability to find and maintain suitable employment, and understand what the regulations are. Understand what the policies are. Read through this material. Don't go into this meeting thinking the person is actually a counselor, like what you would get, when you're counseling with your wife about marital problems. Like, that's not what you're doing. And if you go in there with that in mind, thinking you're going to be doing that, you will probably get burned, especially if you're requesting some kind of more heightened or more expensive goal, like, a goal of law school, like I did, becoming a lawyer, or getting an MBA or PhD or a master's degree, or self-employment. Some of these benefits, if you make a mistake and you don't put in the request the right way, you will end up with some, issues. So it's very important to prepare for the meeting. The regulations that you really need to look at are 38 CFR Part 21. And there are others, but that's the biggest one. You also want to consider they're supposed to follow the Rehabilitation Act and the CRC. So these are, important things to understand, at least if it comes up. But you really want to know what the regs say. Be fluent in the terms that are important. Understand your disabilities and how they affect you. Read through your disability compensation letter that discusses your actual service connection, because that'll help in structuring your argument. Now, when you go in here, how you present things may be used against you. It's important to know that. So again, this is all the more importance based around you preparing for the meeting, filling out the forms properly, and then presenting written support beyond those forms to really drill your point home. And it's very often that you hear about veterans that just don't do it, that aren't prepared, that don't differentiate themselves from other folks. And you'll go in and you might get your benefits or you might not. But it's vital, it's been my experience, that when you go in prepared, you have much higher odds of setting yourself apart from the other veterans, signaling to the counselor that you're not a dummy and that you prepare, right? Even if you are a dummy, if you know enough to prepare, well, by God, that puts you ahead of most other veterans, regardless of IQ, who don't. And going into the first meeting prepared is almost like a job interview, and it's the equivalent to basically going into a job interview without researching the company or the position. You look goofy, and if you really want the benefits that you're seeking, which could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on what you're doing, it's vital for you to definitely get this off on the right foot first time right away. Okay, so that's basically the gist of what I wanted to talk about. Let's see here. So we got a couple questions. So one from Rita, one from Shelley, and one from Daniel. So I'll start at the top. Rita asks or says, I have a serious employment handicap and would like to know if I can receive IU while in training. So some veterans do receive IU while they're in training, and it's a thing that they can get. It's definitely a possibility. So
what? People are getting up to 120% of their trade-in value right now, and we are making the process so simple that anyone can get an offer in minutes. Simply go to our site
So in that type of context, I would definitely encourage someone to, as long as you're in the program, I mean, you get into a sticky issue with IU because they will try to say that, having IU means that you can't ever have a job and you're beyond help. And I've seen some counselors try to say that. It's not always accurate. So it's just really important for you to stay on top of that, okay? But yeah, you can receive IU until you're rehabbed fully. So each case is different though, but it's definitely something you can ask for. Let's see here. So Shelley asked, are you required to retake that exam? So I have seen some instances where some veterans, for whatever reason, are required to retake the career scope. There probably are term of use issues if you have to retake it too frequently. So it's important to at least be mindful of that. Do your best on that program. Don't blow it. Definitely do your best, because it's important to, again, put your best foot forward and to have, as much accurate information as possible in front of that counselor so they can make an informed decision about you. But yes, I have seen instances where they've had to, like a veteran maybe went back into the program later and they wanted to redo the career scope to have a more current exam. So I have seen that. It does happen. So Daniel asks, man, my counselor came from Guam, brand new to the program, didn't even know what the M28 is. Oh yeah, so that's a problem. So there are two policies that kind of overlap. So the M28R is the newest version. The M28 is still used a little bit, but primarily the M28R is the one you really want to look at. There is a copy of an older version on my website. So basically, if you go to va.gov and go to the WARMS section of the website, so WARMS is an acronym, WARMS. So if you just search for VA and then space and then WARMS, you'll be able to find it. But what you'll see is that the VA doesn't collate any of this stuff or that paginate it. So when you go there, you'll have to search through probably like 100 different like downloadable documents to try to find the page that you're looking for. So I spent quite a few hours doing that for you and putting it on my website. I have a new one that I just did that I'm going to put up on the website too. I just haven't done that yet. So I guess when I'm working full time as an attorney and trying to do some of the stuff, the side pet projects of trying to do these paginations and whatnot, it takes a bit of a backseat. So I apologize for the delay there. But anyway, so yes, M28R, it's on my website, but that's not the current version, but it's still searchable. And then you can just go to the WARMS page and take a look and make sure that what you're looking at is current. So you just double check the dates, because there are some changes right now to like self-employment and a few other parts of the program. Sean says, I currently have a little over 4 months left of GI Bill, and I'm applying to voc rehab. When my GI Bill runs out, I will have 11 credits left. If approved, will they only give me enough benefits to cover my last semester, or could I roll into a master's? So Sean, good question. Each case is different. It really depends on your disability ratings, whether you have a serious employment handicap, and whether you can create a reasonable argument in support of why you need a master's degree instead of an undergrad only. So there's a lot of different factors here. A lot of veterans get duped by counselors who tell them that they will assess the additional degree after they complete the undergrad, and then at that point, when the veteran goes back to ask for the master's degree that they thought they had agreed to, suddenly the counselor, especially if there's a new counselor on your case, which happens all the time, will just turn to them and say, well, nope, you're qualified for suitable employment now, you're done with the program, we're going to kick you, boot you, so you got to go find a job, no master's degree for you. So I see this quite frequently. It didn't used to be as big of a problem, now it's a problem. So what I always encourage veterans to do is to make sure that while they're studying for their undergrad, if they do believe reasonably that they need a master's degree or PhD or some other kind of degree to gain suitable employment, to make sure they put in that request before they graduate. Very important, because at least then if you put in the request before you graduate or before you meet the technical requirements for that particular career type.
With Home Chef Fast and Fresh, all you need is a microwave or oven, and just enough time to heat, eat, and repeat. Delicious meets simple.
it'll basically still give you a little bit of ground to argue if you're still not fully qualified, so like a licensure for a lot of jobs, you need that. And so you can't be an accountant if you maybe don't have a CPA, but you can work in accounting as, basically a clerk or a low person on the totem pole without a licensure. So it's important to kind of button that stuff up in advance so that you don't get, booted out of the program without, properly being trained for the appropriate field. So I hope that helps. Kyle Tucker, as a government employee, should I inform my employer that I have a disability percentage? So Kyle, good question. I've seen this really bite some people in the butt later, where at least at the VA will try to say, oh, we didn't know that he had a disability. So if you need reasonable accommodations, or if you just want them to know that you're a person with disabilities who might need reasonable accommodations, put it in writing, though. Don't ever rely on, my word is my bond garbage. That is garbage. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. And if you end up getting terminated, which I've seen quite a few lately, where veterans, just now get their disability ratings, or they just now request reasonable accommodations, and magically their performance numbers suck, immediately afterwards, and they get fired. But it clearly has nothing to do with them requesting reasonable accommodations. Oh no. It's because suddenly their performance numbers suck. No, I mean, you just got to be really careful about that, and put it in writing if you believe that you need reasonable accommodations, or you want your boss to know that you are now a disabled employee and you are entitled to certain benefits. It's really important that you defend yourself, or protect yourself rather, and do your best by documenting whatever it is you're trying to accomplish in writing. Do it in writing, and don't rely on anyone else to do that but you, because that's where a lot of problems happen. When veterans start relying on other people to take care of things, it doesn't happen. And then if it's not documented, then you're out to lunch. Good luck. Nikki McKenzie says, finally approved for Masters in Counseling. Thank you for thanks, Nikki. Appreciate it. Good for you. Daniel says, mine approved me for a bachelor's, but told me if I get my associates while in pursuit, they will discontinue my chapter. That's interesting. Well, yeah, like I said, put in for the request for the higher level degree, try to get it in writing right away, include it within the IWRP. Don't sign the IWRP unless you agree. The IWRP is the Individualized Written Rehabilitation Plan, and that's the one that we use for long-term training for college and other stuff that's similar. Shelley asks, how do you request additional degree like a master's toward becoming a CPA? I am currently in a bachelor's program. Well, you do it very carefully, and you take a look at what it is your goal is, and make sure that your goal is properly aligned with your education, and so or training, whatever it is you're doing. But you got to make sure it's aligned, and so that also means you got to have the document. So if you don't have the document, you can always ask your counselor to forward you a copy of the IWRP. Odds are they will make you fill out a Privacy Act request, FOIA, depending on whatever they request you to fill out. And then to get a copy, once you get a copy, then you can evaluate. But that's super important to make sure you do. Now, Brandon Naaman says or asks, is there any way to get back into Chapter 31 for a master's once you used up Chapter 31 for BS? So for a bachelor's in science. So each case is different, Brandon, and so it depends on how long you've been out of school, how long you've been out of the program. Were you deemed rehabilitated? Some of these things are each variable is so nuanced. Being deemed rehabilitated, it's a whole other thing, and it's a decision that is made that you can't appeal so long as you appeal it within a year of the decision being made. So I just want to highlight that. It's very important that you do it that way.
Training at home is great. Training yourself isn't.
Let's see here. So that's what I would really encourage you to take care of. So Kyle, you mentioned here that you enrolled in voc rehab and start school in a couple months. Good, that's awesome. You may want to inform your employer just so that they're aware, and to highlight that if anyone has any concerns about your performance, that you're in this vocational rehabilitation program that's federal for veterans with service-connected disabilities, and that you have service-connected disabilities. And tell them, I mean, you can even go as far as to tell them exactly which ones. So, but do it in writing so that they know there's no question about what you're doing. So then if there are any concerns, and you do get fired, something happens, you can always have some degree of recourse. So let's see here. So back to Shelley, how do you request additional degree? So you just basically request it from your counselor once you make sure you know what you're asking for. And you're asking for basically a change to your IWRP to include an advanced degree. I have covered that in other videos, but basically it deals with the language of part, let's see, 38 CFR part 2172, so 21.72 is the one that you can really look at for advanced training and the reasons that a counselor might approve it when it goes beyond the length of time and when it goes beyond, some other stuff related to a serious employment handicap. So that's where I would start, just to take a look and see if you qualify for that. So Shelley also asked, what happens if I've already signed the IWRP? Well, if you've already signed it, you're going to have to request a change or an amendment to it. And that can be really hard to do. And this is, again, what I really caution veterans on. Don't sign a damn thing unless you know what it says and you understand what it means and its implications. And so a lot of veterans are just so enamored with the idea of getting, an associate's or just a bachelor's that they don't realize that they're actually not seeking additional educational benefits. So, so we get so excited and we sign this thing without thinking about it, and they don't inform us of our rights and what we could be entitled to, which is, I think, a violation of the duty to assist, and they withhold that information. I think it's totally dishonest, but, it just is what it is right now. So you have to ask for a change, Shelley, and that can be hard to do, but there are regulations about it. If you check, it should be in 38 CFR, like 94. So that would be 38 CFR 21.94 or 0.96. I can't remember which. And that can be, where you start looking at, stuff. And then Lacey Jane, she writes, I had my first appointment this Monday and I was found entitled. It's awesome. My counselor had mentioned an 18-month deadline, but is that 18 months from start to finish or 18 months from our meeting? And what do I do next? I also asked to get a letter of feasibility from my doctor. What does that mean? Oh, I see. So that's interesting that they're having you jump through all these hoops. So I'm going to guess that you probably have a higher disability rating, and they're going to make you jump through these hoops before they approve the plan. So you were approved for benefits, but maybe not training. So you're going to have to, figure that one out. That's going to be potentially tough. It just depends on what your doctor says about feasibility. Daniel says, so if the IWRP is for a bachelor's, I'm set if I do get my associates. So Daniel, I can't answer that because I'm not a counselor, and sometimes these counselors don't follow logic or the law. So I can't answer what your counselor will or won't do. I don't know. But if your IWRP says bachelor's degree and that you're supposed to complete it, then you are required by law to follow what you agree to. And if you don't, then they can kick you out of the program. So I hope that helps. But whatever's written down, you gotta, cooperate and follow that plan. So double check though, get a copy of your IWRP just to make sure that you know what you're talking about. So Shelley asks again, is the request sent to the regional office? So yeah, I guess it is. Depending on wherever the counselors you work with, they can be at sometimes healthcare centers, sometimes they're at the RO, it depends. But yeah, you may have to go in person and present it, in writing, or mail it, or, there's a lot of different ways to do that, but you have to make sure it gets to them. And so because of the way that they're routing mail right now, it might be difficult to get it if you send it by normal mail. So I would fax it or send in a letter as a PDF via email and just tell them, request for change to IWRP in the subject line, and then fill it out, sign it, date it, the request, and then clearly explain why you believe that this additional degree type or training type will help you reach your goal. So you got to really kind of thread the needle, and that can be tricky when you've already made the agreement. but not impossible. It's just, sometimes when veterans get caught in that, that's when they have to hire me as an attorney to come in and do more of the heavy lifting regarding, developing evidence and laying out the legal arguments and supporting claim. So anyway, that is, okay, one more question. I just found out about stipends for the semesters for supplies. Is there? No. So a lot of these questions should be things that your counselor is giving you feedback on. So
For next test, you have to learn and
Sir?
the whole
Hello?
structure around the
Professor?
No.
Okay? So any questions?
So yeah, there are requests, but those are going to be things that your counselor should be giving you. And if they're not responding, that's a problem. So you'll just have to document each time that they don't respond and then move from there. Dale says, I'm currently in college, but not using GI Bill or Voc Rehab. Would you recommend? Okay, so I just answered this last week. So go to my website, Dale, and go see the video, GI Bill versus Voc Rehab, and watch it. I explain the difference. But a lot of veterans just don't understand that the GI Bill and Voc Rehab, they pull away from each other. So no matter what, you're always limited to 48 months no matter what. And you're for sure limited to 36 months of the GI Bill. And with the GI Bill, if you do have entitlement, you can get the higher subsistence payment through the BAH. You can opt for that while using Voc Rehab anyway. So I don't see there being any benefit whatsoever in using the GI Bill at all if you have a disability and qualify in the education track that they approve for your career is consistent with what you want. I see no other real reason or benefit, because Voc Rehab pays for your tuition, pays for all kinds of other stuff that you can't obviously get when you have the GI Bill. So that's my 2 cents there. And I explain this more in depth in the video on my website. If you go there and just scroll down, you'll see the video. So it's basically GI Bill versus Chapter 31. And it talks about the current kind of state of affairs in 2018 and which is better. So I hope that helps. I'm going to sign off for now because I need to get back to work. But thanks for checking in. Look forward to seeing you guys, whoever checked in next week. And otherwise, have an awesome weekend. And thank you for supporting what we do. And, if you want to support us, by God, purchase that guide, because that supports what I do here related to, advocacy and my online stuff. So otherwise, have a great one, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care.